How does that old saying from the Looney Tunes go? That's all, folks. The Devils have mathematically been eliminated from playoff contention, and they had a bad showing against the Maple Leafs. And to make matters worse, they're dealing with a decent amount of injuries yet again to close out the season. The end is near. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here on Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play-by-play announcer, Devils writer for Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. I have this recurring saying on this show that whenever I think the New Jersey Devils have hit rock bottom, I always say it can't get any worse. And I think I've said that 3 or 4 times throughout the course of the year. And somehow, some way, I'm always proven wrong because it can always get worse. Little life lesson for you there. And not only because the Devils have been dealing with a decent amount of injuries to close out the season, including their star player, Jack Hughes, but they have officially been eliminated from playoff contention, meaning it doesn't matter if the Capitals, Flyers, Red Wings, Penguins, whomever lose the rest of the way, and the Devils somehow, some way manage to win the rest of their games. It is now an impossibility for them to get to the Stanley Cup playoffs. And this season has been a disappointment for the Devils, but at least the Devils are not the Flyers, and I mean that with all due respect. I am just saying this from an objective perspective, someone who is not covering the Flyers, someone who is not a fan of the Flyers, but the collapse of the Philadelphia Flyers seriously needs to be studied because it's incredible that just a few weeks ago, they had an 80 or so % chance of making the playoffs, and now it's basically they're on death's door of also being mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. I know we anticipated for the Flyers to crash and burn, but maybe not to this extent. But anyway, this is not Locked On Flyers. This is Locked On Devils. In the first segment, we're going to talk about what went wrong for the Devils because they essentially needed to win the rest of the way. They needed some help. It would have taken like 10 or so miracles for the Devils to have a chance of getting back to the playoffs. But we knew that was pretty much out the door a couple weeks ago when they lost to the Sabres. But focusing on this game, I will share some of my main talking points as to what happened in the game against the Maple Leafs in which the Devils came out on the losing end 5-2. Then in the second segment, I will highlight some players that deserve some more recognition and maybe some players that can step up in the absence of Jack Hughes. And then in the third and final segment, like I do with every post-game recap, I will compare the stats and give the Devils a letter grade. Before we begin with some of my main takeaways from the game, remember when the Devils became the first team since the Colorado Avalanche in 2016 to go undefeated during the preseason? Well, that Avalanche team from a few years ago, they finished off with a record of 22-56-4. And the fact that the Devils took a couple steps back compared to last year, and now they have missed the playoffs, that streak of going undefeated in the preseason and not really panning all that well for you continues to live on. And I think a lot of people were a little concerned about that, but I don't believe in luck or superstition. I just believe in timely or untimely coincidences. But anyway, let's talk about the last few days for the Devils because it's been a bumpy road to say the least. Curtis Lazar, he's done for the rest of the year. He sustained an injury against the Ottawa Senators. Capo Kakkonen, he had to come out early against the Nashville Predators. He's most likely done for the rest of the season. And Jack Hughes, we're going to talk about his injury situation in a full-fledged episode very soon because I feel like the information and the narrative, the speculation, it deserves to be talked about in a great amount of detail and not just a minor thing in a post-game recap episode. But Jack Hughes will get shoulder surgery today when this episode goes live in Denver, Colorado. And it basically confirmed a lot of people's suspicion, which was Jack Hughes seemed to be playing through injury and he possibly needed surgery. I said on the show I could neither confirm nor deny if he needed surgery, but I did admit that he did look a little slow. And I talked with a few people in the Devils organization, and basically the word around the street was that Jack Hughes did play through injury, and it was just a matter of time as to what the severity of it is, and now we know what's going on. But in this game, for the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Devils are just going through the motion at this point because they are severely shorthanded. You lost Curtis Lazar, key depth asset, career year for Lazar. Jack Hughes, your star player. Capo Kakinen, your backup goalie, and the goalie woes continue for the Devils. That's why Akira Schmid was brought up from Utica. It's going to be a drag to the finish line. I don't know what else to tell you, because if you look at some of the players that were in the starting lineup, Shane Bowers, who was on the top line with Nico, Hischier, and Jesper Bratt, he was suiting up in his 5th game this season. Nolan Foote, he made his season debut after coming back from injury. He played on the same line as Curtis McDermott and Chris Tierney. It's to give some of those guys a chance in the lineup and to showcase what they could potentially do from here on out, because it reminds me what happened a few years ago for Devils when they dealt with a lot of injury. You basically saw a lot of Utica Comets players come up to the roster and basically be given a chance to showcase their skill set to end out the season, which there's a curse and a blessing for it. The blessing is that maybe one of these guys can ball out and be a factor going into the offseason, and who knows what can happen down the line. But the curse is that it basically tells you that the season is pretty much done, and the Devils, their priority is obviously there's nothing they can really do at this point, because it doesn't matter if they win the rest of the way. So they're playing for, I guess, draft position at this point. And when looking at this game against the Maple Leafs, it's just wash, rinse, and repeat. And I wish I can give you guys a different narrative, but I really can't, because it's the same thing that we've been seeing all season long. The Devils get off to a 1-0 disadvantage, because who scored the first goal of the game? It was Nicholas Robertson on a lengthy shift, and somehow, some way, the Devils could not rebound the puck and they could not clear it. And despite, like I said, the lengthy shift, the Maple Leafs still cracked the scoring column, and that put the Devils behind early. Nico Hischier, got to give credit when credit is due. He tied up the game minutes later, and hopefully that gave the Devils some new life. And this is something else that has happened with the Devils throughout the course of the year. When they go down 1-0, they sometimes show spurts of having some sort of heart or effort, and they regain the lead. And it seems like the positivity works into their favor, because they had a 2-1 lead thanks to Nico Hischier, like I just said, and Dawson Mercer. But what happened? The Maple Leafs scored 4 unanswered goals on the Devils, and at one point, a goal from William Nylander was waved off after it was deemed that Jake Allen initially did make the save. And the Devils were given a mulligan. They were still down 3-2, but you're given another chance to basically tie the game, because coming back from a 1-goal deficit is a lot easier than a 2-goal deficit, especially against this Maple Leafs team that has a generational type player in Austin Matthews that you really got to keep your eye out for. The only thing I like about Austin Matthews is his last name. I don't know why, but something about Austin Matthews, his last name, just really speaks to me. But jokes aside, you saw the Devils. They had to focus a lot on Austin Matthews, especially if he gets into the slot area, because if he gets the puck deep into the attacking end for the Maple Leafs, you're done. You are totally done for. And we saw that on Tyler Bertuzzi's goal to tie the game to a pop. And then literally just like 10 seconds later, Mark Giordano, old man Giordano, got one past Allen with ease from the top of the point, it looked like. And you just saw that the Devils, the wind was knocked out of their sails, and it just snowballs into something bigger. And I knew the Maple Leafs were a good team, but still 4 straight goals after you had a 2-1 lead. Show some heart to some sort of extent, because this is your final chance and you didn't make the most of it. And as a result, you got thrashed once again. I wrote down the list of things that the Devils have dealt with in this game that kind of resonate the entire season. 1-0 them. Gaining momentum, losing momentum, being given a second chance, but still squandering that, snowballing into something bigger to the point where you know you're not going to win the game. That's the quintessential of the Devils' 2023-2024 season. Obviously, we're going to come back to that topic when the season officially comes to an end, because we definitely need to have the discussion. Was this season truly a failure? Because there were some things that didn't go into the Devils' favor, but in games like this, it's just disappointing to see, especially since the Devils had a lead to work with and they blew it, and there was nothing they could really do. So I'm going to highlight some players that caught my eye momentarily, but before we continue, let me tell you about the Sleeper app. Regardless of where the Devils are at in the current standings, I want to remind you that you can win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily hockey fantasy contests. You don't just have to participate in fantasy hockey. You can participate in football, basketball, baseball, college football, and more, all on the Sleeper app. To win a 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Devils fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. All right, let's talk about some players that caught my eye. Like I said in segment 1, losing Jack Hughes was definitely a big blow for the Devils, but at this point in the season, they're not going to the playoffs. Their chances of going to the playoffs prior to this game were very slim to none. They would have needed like 10 miracles, as I alluded to, but still, losing your star player is never easy for any franchise. But the one thing I want people to know is that the Devils are not just a one-star shop. They have a lot of good other assets on their roster, including their captain, Nico Hischier, because what I saw Nico Hischier do this game was walk away with another multi-point performance. And now Hischier, this regular season, in 68 game appearances, he has 65 points. He walked away with 2 points in this matchup. He had a goal and he had an assist. On his goal, late in the first period, he sliced and diced his way through 2 Maple Leafs players, and he went from the forehand to the backhand to find the back of the net. That was picturesque, poetry in motion from Nico Hischier. And I want to remind people that Nico Hischier is a very good player, because I put this out on social media a few days ago, which is Nico Hischier missed almost a month of the season due to a head injury, yet he has X amount of points in this amount of games. He's almost a point per game player, and it raises the question, had he not missed that significant time due to injury, what would his numbers look like? And why is that not the narrative on social media? Instead, I just see a bunch of people saying that Nico Hischier is not a good captain because they're putting all the Devils' struggles on his shoulders, which is ludicrous if you ask me. But in this matchup, it just goes to show you that the Devils have a lot of other star-capable players, including the captain, Nico Hischier. Case in point in this matchup once more, because this isn't the first time that Nico Hischier has shown those types of capabilities. And now, Dawson Mercer. Dawson Mercer has scored a decent amount of goals this season, but I think it's safe to say that he has kind of taken a step backwards compared to last year, because at one point last season, especially in January and February, we just saw him be so dominant. But the thing is that he has 20 goals this season, but he only has 33 points to show for it. The thing about Dawson Mercer is that his role is going to expand even more now that Jack Hughes is out. And we actually saw this play out early on in the season. Remember when Jack Hughes went down with his first injury after the St. Louis Blues game, I believe? Dawson Mercer was in a big-time slump to open up the season. And when Jack Hughes went down with his injury, immediately Dawson Mercer started to make an impact. And now we saw the same thing be played out in this game because in the wake of the absence of Jack Hughes, Dawson Mercer was put onto the first power play unit, and he walked away with a power play goal. First and foremost, great initial setup by Nico Hischier on the shot attempt, and Mercer found an open net opportunity on Joseph Wall to give the Devils their first and only lead of the game, up 2-1. And the thing is that Mercer is capable of doing that. And I think Bill Spaulding and Ken Danico talked about it during the telecast, which is when the Devils had someone like Tyler Toffoli on their roster first half of the year, Tyler Toffoli obviously ate up a good chunk of those power play opportunities. Same with Jack Hughes for obvious reasons, which kind of left Dawson Mercer as the odd man out. But Tyler Toffoli no longer on the Devils roster. Jack Hughes out with injury for the rest of the year. Now this gives Dawson Mercer a significant chance to showcase what he can do. My thing is for Mercer, and I might be playing devil's advocate here, no pun intended, but if Mercer is able to close out these last 3 or 4 games for the Devils and have some solid point production, I think all will be forgiven. And the coaching staff and the front office will highlight that and say, maybe he just needs a bigger role, because that was the thing last year for Mercer, which was he had a big role on that line with Nico Hischier and Tomas Tatar. And Brendan Smith, don't look now, but he has 5 points in his last 4 games because he got the secondary assist on Nico Hischier's goal. And who got the primary assist? Dawson Mercer. So I would say it was a very productive day at the office for Nico Hischier, Dawson Mercer, and Brendan Smith also chipping on in, because both Hischier and Mercer assisted on each other's goals. And Smith was able to add to his solid point productive last few games, which is incredible to me, but still not enough to beat the Maple Leafs. I think the one thing I saw on social media that kind of caught my eye is that with Nico Hischier, Dawson Mercer, all those guys, you get to see that the Devils are not just the Jack Hughes show. And I know people are going to say, like, people pay to watch Jack Hughes play, which is true to an extent. And I think people are taking that quote out of context, but digressing a little bit. Nico Hischier has been having a phenomenal year, if you ask me, and no one is really giving him the right amount of credit. And I think I've said this many times on this show. And for Dawson Mercer, I guess you could say it's been a bit of a down year, but 20 goals is still not an easy thing to do, if you ask me. And I think that kind of speaks volume to the capabilities that Dawson Mercer has and is able to show in the near future. But this game in general for Devils was just disappointing. There haven't been too many bright spots of the season. And I know it's going to be basically a slow walk to the finish line. And I think a lot of Devils fans, Devils media, I think we're just counting down the days until this season is officially put to bed and we can all move on with our lives. And I guess you could say Cancun on 3. Now, I'm going to compare the stats, give the Devils a letter grade momentarily. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance, superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, let's compare the stats, give the Devils a letter grade, and get out of here and keep counting down the days until we can all go home and forget about this season. Shots on goal differential, 37-20 in favor of the Maple Leafs. I got to give Jake the Snake some credit. He did make a few big saves for the Devils, including stopping William Nylander point blank at one point. But when we look at the shots on goal differential period after period, the Devils kind of let their guard down against the Maple Leafs because Toronto led the shots on goal category for all three periods. But if you look at the first period, 7-4 in favor of the Maple Leafs. Okay, not too bad. But after that, 15-8, second and third in favor of the Maple Leafs. Incredible. Devils did pretty decent in the first period, if you ask me. But they just could not keep that consistency, and that's another thing. That's been their downfall. Face-off percentage, 54% to the Devils, 46% to the Maple Leafs. Power play, Devils were 1 for 2 thanks to Dawson Mercer. Maple Leafs 0 for 3. All right, I think the Devils did a pretty decent job on the PK, and that's something that they've been doing a lot better to close out the season. And the Maple Leafs are actually susceptible to giving up shorthanded goals. Unfortunately, Devils weren't able to rack one up because I believe the Maple Leafs have given up 9 shorthanded goals throughout the course of this season. Hits 12-5 in favor of the Maple Leafs. Block shots 19-11 in favor of the Devils. Giveaways, Devils led that department 8-4. Takeaways, Devils also led that department 9-8. If I had to give the Devils a letter grade, considering the circumstances, considering the fact that we already knew they weren't going to the playoffs, and now it just makes it mathematically official. Jack Hughes is out. Devils are missing some key assets, including their backup goalie and a key depth asset. Oh, boy. I guess I got to be a little lenient. I'll give them they had to lead. Oh, this is tough. I'm hovering between a C- and a D+, but ultimately I'll just give them a C- because I don't know what to expect out of the Devils at this point. My expectations are anywhere from moderate to low at this point in the season. And I think I'm perfectly justified in that. And it's the final few post-game recaps to close out the 2023-2024 season. Leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. What did you think about the Devils' performance? What are your thoughts on Jack Hughes? Like I said, I will talk more about Jack Hughes' injury circumstance in a near future episode because I think it deserves to be a full-fledged discussion and not a minor talking point in a post-game recap. If you're listening on a podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X page app at TreyMatt4 or the show's X page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening once again.